Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, in the middle of the night, a radar operator aboard a destroyer sees a blip. Then it disappears. Appears again. Disappears. At the same moment, the pilot of an Iranian fighter is shouting over the radio that he sees some kind of silhouette, and suddenly the connection cuts out. Nothing was shot down, just silence. The U.S. military officially stated that F-22s and F-35s were in the sky, a standard mission, nothing unusual. But several analysts who gained access to radar data and surveillance recordings stopped and looked at each other. This was not an F-22, and not an F-35. It was something else. So what exactly happened? During a U.S. military operation against Iran, several independent sources detected an aircraft in the sky behaving strangely. Not the way the aircraft we know usually behave. It would appear on radar for a fraction of a second and then vanish. Not jamming the signal, not deploying electronic countermeasures, just disappearing. As if it had never been there at all. Iranian air defense systems, including fairly modern Russian-made platforms, could not lock onto the target. Not because they didn't try. There was simply nothing they could track. And yet the aircraft was clearly carrying out a combat mission. It maneuvered, it struck, it returned to base, and no one has officially confirmed that it even exists. The first question analysts asked was simple. Maybe it was just an F-22 operating in an unusual mode, or perhaps some modified version of the F-35. Why did everyone assume it was an F-22 or an F-35? The logic was straightforward. The United States already has 2 generations of stealth fighters, and both are extremely capable. The F-22 Raptor is still considered one of the best air-to-air fighters in the world. Fast, stealthy, and incredibly maneuverable. The F-35 Lightning II represents a different concept altogether. Not a pure fighter, but a platform packed with advanced sensors that can see the battlefield better than almost anything else in the sky. When the first recordings reached analysts, the silhouette looked familiar. The stealth signature also seemed recognizable, and U.S. officials insisted there was nothing new in the air. But then the detailed comparison began. The maneuver speed didn't match, the turning angles looked impossible for an F-22, and the reaction time between detecting a target and launching an attack was too short even for an F-35 with all of its computing power. Something in the sky was behaving as if it could think faster than a human pilot. So, what gave the new aircraft away? This is where things become truly interesting. First, decision speed. Between the moment an Iranian missile locked onto the target and the moment the aircraft began an evasive maneuver, less than a second passed. A human pilot simply cannot react that fast, which suggests one thing. The system made the decision on its own. Second, the flight profile. The aircraft changed altitude several times at a rate no known operational fighter can achieve. Even an F-22 at full afterburner doesn't move like that. And third, the most important detail. The aircraft didn't just avoid detection, it seemed to know exactly where Iranian radars were located. It wasn't simply flying stealthy, it was choosing its route to stay inside the radar blind spots. This wasn't a pilot, it was an algorithm. And that was the moment when analysts finally said out loud what everyone had been thinking. This was not an F-22, and it wasn't an F-35. This was F-47. So what do we actually know about this fighter? Or more precisely, what can we reasonably assume? Speed. According to analysts, the F-47 may be capable of flying at more than Mach 2.5 without afterburners. That means the aircraft could maintain sustained supersonic flight without the extra thrust normally required from the engines. For comparison, the F-22 also has a supercruise capability, but its speed in that mode is estimated at about Mach 1.8. The F-35, on the other hand, was never designed for long-duration supersonic flight. If these estimates are correct, the F-47 could become one of the fastest stealth fighters ever to take to the skies. Range. Another detail that caught experts' attention is the aircraft's range. Based on possible operation routes, the aircraft may have been able to operate deep over enemy territory without aerial refueling. Analysts estimate a combat radius of more than about 1,860 miles. For comparison, the F-35 has a combat radius of roughly 620 to 680 miles, while the F-22 is around 530 miles without external fuel tanks. If these numbers are accurate, the F-47 would be able to operate in places other fighters simply cannot reach. Stealth. And this is where the biggest technological leap may be hiding. In previous generations of aircraft, stealth was achieved mainly through the shape of the airframe and special coatings that absorb radar waves. But some experts believe the F-47 may use active signature suppression. In other words, the aircraft may not only try to avoid radar detection but actually distort or neutralize radar signals. That would represent an entirely different level compared to the stealth technologies used in the F-22 or F-35. Sensors. The F-35 is often called a flying computer because it collects data from dozens of sensors and presents the pilot with a single unified picture of the battlefield. But the F-47 appears to go even further. Full 360-degree awareness, instant data exchange with satellites, other aircraft, and drones, and the ability to track dozens of targets at the same time. If the F-35 is a node in the network, the F-47 could become the command center of the entire aerial combat system. Artificial intelligence. In modern aircraft, computers help the pilot process information. But in the case of the F-47, the role of AI may be much greater. The system doesn't just assist the pilot, it works alongside them. While the human is making one decision, algorithms are already analyzing the situation and calculating several possible battle scenarios. In aerial combat, where everything is decided in seconds, that advantage could be critical. Weapons. According to preliminary assumptions, the F-47 may carry hypersonic missiles in internal weapon bays to preserve its stealth profile. For comparison, the F-22 and F-35 use AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, which fly at around Mach 4. Hypersonic weapons could move significantly faster. There are also discussions about integrating directed energy weapons, such as lasers. And another intriguing possibility is the ability to control a swarm of drones directly from the cockpit, turning the fighter into a command hub for a group of combat drones. Now let's imagine something simple. What happens if we place the F-47 next to the most powerful fighters operating today? Let's start with the F-22 Raptor. It's a legend of air combat. The aircraft that for decades was considered the unreachable standard. But there's one important detail to remember. It was designed back when smartphones didn't even exist. It was built for a world where speed, maneuverability, and getting the first missile shot were the most important factors. The F-47, however, appears to operate by completely different logic. It's no longer just a fighter, it's a node in an entire combat system. Now the F-35. It's sometimes criticized, but in reality, it's one of the smartest aircraft ever built. It can see the battlefield earlier than others and share that information with the entire Allied network. The F-35 is a universal platform. It has to perform dozens of different roles. The F-47, however, appears to have been designed without those compromises. Maximum effectiveness in air warfare and nothing extra. Next is China's J-20. This is probably the closest rival on a global scale. China has invested enormous resources into this program, and the aircraft is already actively deployed on combat duty. The J-20 is large, fast, and designed to hunt support aircraft. But the main difference may lie somewhere else, in the level of digital integration. If the F-47 truly uses artificial intelligence to manage combat operations, that represents a completely different level of interaction with the battlefield. And finally, the Su-57. The Russian fighter looks extremely aggressive and has strong maneuverability. But it has two major problems: limited production numbers and ongoing debate about its actual stealth capabilities. Many experts believe it relies more on speed and maneuverability than on full radar invisibility. And this is where the key point becomes clear. Each of these aircraft was the peak of its own era. The F-47 represents the next one. So why would the United States hide the existence of the F-47? It's a logical question. Why conceal something you could proudly show to the world? The first reason is strategic. As long as an adversary doesn't know what to look for, they can't develop effective countermeasures. The moment the real capabilities of the F-47 become public, China and Russia will immediately start investing resources to build an answer. The second reason is diplomatic. Admitting that a new aircraft has already seen combat over Iran would mean officially acknowledging the scale and nature of those operations. The third reason is purely technical. The F-47 may simply not be ready for full disclosure yet. It could still be undergoing development, and every real mission might also serve as a test. The United States has done this before. The F-117 flew missions for years before the world even learned it existed. The SR-71 officially didn't exist for more than a decade. So what do we have? An aircraft that officially doesn't exist. Capabilities that could rewrite the rules of air warfare, and possibly its first real combat experience, over the skies of Iran. The F-47 is proof that we are already living in a new era, an era where the pilot in the cockpit is no longer the fastest part of the system, where invisibility is no longer just the shape of the fuselage, but an active technology, where decisions are made by artificial intelligence and the human simply signs off on them. Will this change the balance of power? Without a doubt. But here's the final question I'll leave you with. If this is just one secret aircraft that we happen to glimpse, how many more programs like this are hidden right now? Subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Leave a like to support and help promote my content. Thank you, and see you next time.